Hello, everybody. First off, I'm keeping the suit. Second off, the way that I'm about to glaze this game is the way you've never seen a game glazed before. Because I'm gonna do it without spoiling more than the first 10 minutes of gameplay, and I'm gonna change the way that you see this game. I'm gonna point out a ton of tiny little niche details you probably didn't notice about the design and development of Silksong. The first thing that we see after the opening cutscene of this game is this green, glowing atmosphere. There's no UI on screen yet, and there's also no music, so instead we focus on the sounds that we hear. You hear some rock tumbling, some water, and then you hear 4 metallic thunk sounds from Hornet's nail that then lands on the ground next to her. If we look up, and we look at the platforms directly above this area, we'll actually find the exact places that the nail bounced off of. It starts by hitting these first 2 platforms that are kind of high up here, and then there's a little pause, and then it hits these 2 that are closer together in sequence. Beautiful. It's also near the higher set of platforms that we can find this Lumafly, which I think is the same Lumafly from the opening cutscene that breaks the spell on Hornet's carriage. Once Hornet's nail lands on the ground, you can see her health bar pop up, and it's revealed that she's hanging on by a thread at 1 heart. So she heals, and then the music starts, which invites you to go ahead and begin the game. Now, I don't usually really like when games always have the same stereotypical green grassy zone to begin with. Mario, Zelda, really any game that has multiple regions will usually put you in a forest or a plains area first, since that feels familiar to real life. And it's not anxiety-inducing, so it's a nice gradual start, I think is the idea. So I wasn't thrilled to feel like, okay, I'm starting in the green zone in Silksong, but it works really nicely here. Because red, the color of Hornet, is actually opposite the color wheel of green, so it stands out the most against it. They are considered complementary colors. So the starting region being Hornet in a green environment looks really, really good. And this is clearly something that Team Cherry paid attention to because of how much they've changed colors throughout the development of Silksong. The red that we see for Hornet's cloak in the reveal trailer is much more muted. Now it is a lot more vivid. Even the same early green region in the original version was much less bright than it is now. In the opening cutscene of the game, they kind of did the same thing. They made the shadows darker and the highlights brighter. So it's safe to say that the amount of contrast and the use of color in this game has been evolving for a long time. Because in Hollow Knight, we didn't really see that at all until later in the game. The player in Hollow Knight has a blue cloak, and all the early environments are also blue, so there's not really as much of that visual pop. You feel more blended in with the world, and you just look like you belong there. From a narrative perspective, that actually makes complete sense, because he does belong here. But Hornet does not belong here. So she's meant to stand out, and with the use of color, she literally does. That's pretty cool. At this point, we have now analyzed a mighty 5 seconds of the game. Hornet keeps on trotting to the left, and when she jumps, she has this little echo on her voice because we're in a cave and you can hear dripping water echo the same way. Eventually, when you do make it above ground, her voice and her attacks have less of an echo, which is a cool little detail. But when you keep walking, the name of this area is revealed as Moss Grotto. The text for it is brought on screen by the same kind of animation we saw earlier when Hornet grabbed her nail and healed from her fall. The first thing that I noticed when I started exploring this area was how smooth the movement felt. I did a video just like this on Hollow Knight, and in that video I talked about how the physics are responsible for the smooth movement. But in this case, I actually think it's because of the animations. Every single action that you can take in this game has frames of the animation that will transition it into the next action. If you slow it down, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about here. This is why I think jumps feel so nice, climbing onto ledges, attacking. It doesn't ever feel like the response from your button press is interrupting something, so it just flows together really nice. In my game development class, we recently learned about this idea of adding juice to your game, which is basically just whenever you add that last layer of polish to your game, you make every action just a little bit more satisfying for the player. So maybe that's adding screen shake, or you have an impact frame in your combat where the enemy flashes white to make it feel more powerful. Maybe it's sound effects, or maybe it's beams of light. All of that and so much more is literally already what Silksong has in its first 60 seconds of gameplay. And the animations are really not any different. They are fully juiced up, they are polished. I would also argue that polish is present in how all the corpses of what you kill will stay on the ground. All of the caterpillars that you fight in this area, and really all the enemies enemies anywhere. They'll respawn if you leave the area and then come back, but until then, their bodies are gonna stay there exactly where you killed them. I honestly feel like this game would feel a lot different if the enemies disappeared on death, they dissolved away or faded out, because these corpses, especially later in the game, can kind of be used as waypoints to navigate. For a Metroidvania game where it's gonna be harder to tell where you are, having enemies that are always in the same spot and then probably also dying in the same spot just helps you that much more. But you know what's even cooler than observing all this intentionality and beautiful design? Making a game, or learning technical skills, which is exactly what you can do with today's sponsor, Triple 10. Do you know how scary it is looking at the world of game development and looking at the industry, especially right now? I have a lot of friends who work in AAA development, and even they are scared of getting pay cuts or randomly being laid off. That just shouldn't be the case for an industry that is as cool and creative and awesome and sexy as game development. And with Triple 10, it actually doesn't have to be so scary. Triple 10 is a platform that allows you to get a technical education and actually get the job that you want to land. UI, UX, AI development, cybersecurity, QA, so much more. Even if you've never coded before, you have the chance to learn skills that will benefit your career for decades to come. Because get this, 82% of graduates get hired within 6 months of finishing the program. That's crazy. That's definitely a lot more than college could probably say. They literally tell you that you will either get a job or get your money back, guaranteed. So go and flip off that job market and learn a new job with Triple 10 starting at $200 a month. And if you want a free career consultation, you can scan this little QR code, or you can check out the link in the description. Thank you, Triple 10, for sponsoring, and let's get back to glazing Silksong. Now, in my Hollow Knight video, I talked about how every region in this game seamlessly transitions to the next one because of these transition zones, I called it. In the early game transition from the Crossroads to Green Path, there's this zone between the two areas that blends features of each place. The color palette shifts, you see rock become mossy rock, some new sound effects slowly kick in, and there's really not much of a purpose to these transition zones other than to introduce a new region. Well, in Silksong, that same concept exists, but it's done a lot differently, and in my opinion, a lot better. In Hollow Knight, I feel like these areas were always pretty obvious and very clear-cut. You could always kind of tell when you're approaching a zone that's meshing into a new region. But in Silksong, the first thing that tells you you're approaching something new is a lot more subtle. It's stuff like the particle effects. All of Moss Grotto, which is the only part we've looked at of Silksong so far, has these green particles floating around everywhere. Great for vibes, but even greater when you notice that leaving Moss Grotto changes the color of some particles. You go from green to half green, half gray, and then fully gray. These particles are literally always present to some capacity throughout the entire game, so it's neat to see how they change and enhance that progression. It's also worth noting that unlike the first 5 minutes of Hollow Knight, we have already been exposed to a new area. We see a new enemy that we haven't seen anywhere in Moss Grotto. In the first, 30 minutes of Hollow Knight, you're kind of fighting a lot of the same style of enemies over and over. You're working with the same blue, purple color palette, and nothing really feels new until you make it to Green Path. But here, less than 5 minutes into Silksong, we already have a new area. Not all areas in Silksong feel like they're as pronounced as a shift as they are in Hollow Knight. Transitions between areas happen over larger amounts of space, which I feel like just makes the world feel more interconnected and woven together. But pretty soon after this, we get to see hints of yet another area, this time characterized by more man-made looking decorations, a smoother style of rock, and of course, our very first bench. This bench in Silksong is very interesting, because without this beam of light coming down on it, or without the way the camera focuses on it, it blends into the environment really well. A lot of benches in this world and in Hollow Knight feel like this. The developers easily could have put an arrow above the bench to tell you where to go, they could have outlined it, or made them really stand out in their design. But instead of doing that, the presence of a bench is emphasized in very natural and organic ways that don't break your immersion. A beam of light or a shift in the camera don't feel like they're being forced down your throat. Genuinely nothing in the game so far has felt like that, but even so, you as a player have been guided down a really linear path. That's another difference from the first game. In Hollow Knight, once you get to the first real area in the game, which I would say is the crossroads, you could go left, you could go right. Either way, you'll have to eventually find this boss fight, you'll have to eventually probably find Cornifer, but that could take anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes for the player. It probably took me like 20. A lot of people who don't like this game usually stop after that first boss fight, I've noticed, because once they get there, they're so tired of going in circles and they don't want to do it again. Obviously, that was not the case for me, or most people, but for people who didn't like the game, that was kind of the consensus that I got. Silksong literally eliminates that problem. All these introductory areas feel very big because platforms are so spaced out, and we've already seen 3 different subregions with different colors and motifs. We feel like we are exploring, but we're not really. The game so far is doing a great job at holding your hand without feeling like it is. When you run into the first boss fight, it is less than 7 minutes into the game, guaranteed. And when we kill this thing, we get another example of the juice that I talked about earlier. A ton of particles release, the screen shakes, and your kill feels very powerful. This is then a natural point to ascend up a rope, which feels special since this is the first time that we've seen this prompt. It feels like we're progressing. When you climb out, homegirl gets some period cramps, so she passes out, and then this lady wakes her up. Now, this is cool because this is the first time that we see dialogue in-game. This time the dialogue box feels a bit darker than it did in Hollow Knight. I might be tripping about this. It feels like the text is on a darker box, which is great for accessibility and legibility. But unlike Hollow Knight, our protagonist actually talks, which is very interesting, and she has a little hornet symbol when she's speaking. This is really cool. It's pretty easy as a developer to subconsciously fall into like template design choices. Usually dialogue boxes in game design mean that you need the text being said, a name of the speaker, and then some sort of indicator of who is talking. And usually all of that kind of falls in the same format. You have the words, the name on top, and then the picture also on top or to the side. Sticking to that more predictable format isn't necessarily bad, and if anything it's fine because the player is going to be familiar with it. But Silksong doesn't follow that convention, and it's kind of crazy to think about if it did. If you had a picture of Hornet and it would change emotions based on how she's speaking like it does in RPG games. The format that we have in game mostly relies on you looking at the characters in game and not exaggerated or more detailed pictures. Speaker's name is at the bottom left of the screen, and the thing that tells us if someone new is speaking is the voice, the icon, and whether or not the dialogue box closes before it opens again. I also really like the difference that we have from Hollow Knight here, which is that our protagonist does talk. She's got some words to say. Inherently, this puts you into the story a lot more as an active participant than it does in Hollow Knight. We know more about Hornet from how she talks, how she judges the world, what she reacts to. We know her incentive for being here because she tells the chapel maid. In our conversation with the chapel maid, she gives you the first quest of the game, which is to ascend through the lands of Farloom to reach the citadel at the kingdom's peak. This is what I would like to call a Ganon-type quest. In Breath of the Wild, you always have that distant quest of, okay, do whatever you want, but know that your main objective is to eventually kill Ganon. You can't do it yet, and you're nowhere close, but you always know in the back of your brain that that is how you end the game. In my opinion, I think that type of system is great in an open world game like Breath of the Wild or in a Metroidvania like Silksong, because they give you so much freedom. You can go anywhere in these games, you can kind of do whatever, and once the game lets go of your hand, they have let go of your hand. So a big overarching quest like this is really useful to stay grounded and stay on track. If you find yourself not knowing what to do in Silksong, you know that you should probably try and go up. Now, by this point, all of the gameplay has felt like an appetizer to the main course, like the introduction to a game, because it has been. It's been subtly linear in order to teach you all the mechanics. The moment that it feels like you're set free in Silksong and done with the tutorial is right here. You step into this light and the brightness takes over your screen for a little bit. And now, for the first time in the whole game, you can't see the ceiling or any platforms above you. It's just as much symbolic of a new beginning as it literally is. The little bugs that were in the background of the first boss fight fly away, coming from the direction that you killed their mother. And this is the most open that we've seen an area in game so far. That's when you stumble across this town called Bone Bottom. Jeans, and Boots with the Fur. The whole club is looking at her because as she walks by, all the NPCs turn their heads to look at her. You are probably the most interesting thing to come by this town in a long time. You enter this building, and Shadi goes low, low, low as she descends into the basement. There's some particles in the air, similar to the ones we saw earlier, but now they're more frequent and thicker to show that this is a very dusty, abandoned area. And if we keep going down, we run into this guy named Fearful Pilgrim. Notice how only certain NPCs in this game, and in Hollow Knight, have names. It's pretty common for the name of a bug to just be their role in this society, like the chapel maid, or for the name to portray how they're feeling, which I guess adds to the ambience of the location. But the fact that really only the recurring NPCs in Silksong have names does make them more memorable. The chapel maid that wakes you up from your period cramps is arguably pretty important, but clearly she isn't important enough to take away attention from all the other NPCs that the game does want you to know by name. Because it's more important to the developers that you remember the names of everyone who's meant to be loved and meant to be remembered. Now, by this point, we are a grand 10 minutes into Silksong. 10 minutes, and we have picked apart not even a fraction of the artistry behind this game. I love video games, because the same way that we study literature in school and we can siphon so much meaning out of a single character or a single sentence, we can do the same thing with one screenshot of a video game. 3 people put together this game. 3 people made this video game and put all that effort into these tiny little details. Things that you might not even notice, because that is just what games do. Thank you so much for watching my absolute glaze fest of Silksong. This is probably not going to be the last time that I do it. I'm only like a couple hours into the game right now. If you're interested in watching it, I stream it here on YouTube. You can see it in the live tab. Massive shout out to all the member-uppers from my first YouTube stream, and thank you so much. But for now, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!